Hello and welcome to my first video discussing what I think about Light No Fire. This video covers specific topic surrounding the mystery of Light No Fire. That is, whether or not it is an MMO or acts like one in the traditional sense. But first, who am I? How do I qualify enough to give you a realistic, grounded view of things? I could go into a long detail about how I can be qualified to discuss matter, but it would have to be its own video if people are interested. The short of it is, I am not an expert by any stretch of the imagination. I realize what my weaknesses are. However, though I've not released any huge projects, I have created some games. Jams mostly. 2 years ago, I was able to actually become brave enough to release my first game, Chroma Cycle. My strengths aren't understanding multiplayer systems and procedural generation techniques. I'm very versed in problem solving, engaging what can and cannot be done with resources based on my own experiences. I have communicated with developers, both large and small, over the years. All in all, I've been buzzing around the game development scene for about 40 plus years. I'm currently developing 2 games slowly in the background as hobbies and hope that at least one will bear fruit. One is getting close. One is a multiplayer with light generative parts, the other is purely procedurally generated. First things first, we gotta look at who Hello Games is. They were started in 2008 with 4 founders, Sean Murray, David Ream, Ryan Doyle, and Grant Duncan. They were a small cadre of developers who left other studios, including Electronic Arts. The founding principles they founded the studio on was creative control, a return to fun, and avoiding sequels. All of which at the time, and to the present day, too many large development houses either have problems with or get stuck on. Hello Games broke this mold greatly in the years to come. Short list of what they've released: 2010, Joe Danger. 2012, Joe Danger 2. A sequel, but I guess for the right reasons, rather than the wrong reasons. In 2016, they released No Man's Sky, and 2020, The Last Campfire. All of these games were well received, except for No Man's Sky, their most ambitious title. At release, it failed to meet expectations that were set up in the leading years between 2013 and 2016. This led to the studio to put its head down and then release 40 plus free DLC-sized updates over a period of 8 years. They also have two to-be-determined releases, which is Stage Fright as a publisher, and Light No Fire, which is the discussion of today. Depending on who you listen to, look up, etc., they are worth anywhere between £34 million to £136 million in value. A very successful indie studio. They are not a huge studio financially by any means, and their value is mostly tied up in their earnings reports and their IP asset value. This comes into discussion as we move along soon. The current studio is home to anywhere between 45 and 50 people currently, at least from the 2022 audit, within about 45 employees. This also comes into discussion later. So, what is Light No Fire? We have very little information to go by. It seems to be an adventuring RPG set in a procedurally generated world the size of Earth, or in Sean's words, perhaps a bit larger. It has flying mounts such as dragons and birds. We see gliders and small boats. We see people who are either are or look like anthropomorphic animals. We're shown large monolithic beings that look ancient, powerful, and perhaps wise. We are introduced to some rabbits bowing before a team of adventurers as a large ogre sits nearby looking up with interest. In a span of 2 minutes, we are shown a lot of things, but none of them really contain concrete answers to the finer details of the game. By the Steam page, we know the following things. The tags. It's an open world, survival, adventure, exploration, sandbox, RPG, action, action-adventure, action RPG, procedural generation, fantasy, atmospheric, base building, multiplayer, dragons, crafting, single-player, online co-op, and indie. In the About This Game section, we have Light No Fire is a game about adventure, building, survival, and exploration together. Set in a fantasy planet the size of Earth, it brings the depth of a role-playing game and the freedom of a survival sandbox. It is a multiplayer Earth. Carve a life together, meet players from across the globe, build a life, explore, and survive together, construct persistent building and communities, or strike out alone to discover the world for others. A procedural Earth, a truly open world with no boundaries at a scale never attempted before. A massively varied and dense planet filled with immersive biomes, unique enemies, and valuable resources to discover. A fantasy Earth. Light No Fire presents you with an ancient Earth to uncover, one where you are not the hero. Thick with lore, mystery, and constant fight for survival. Inspired by the adventure, charm, and imagination of what we love from classic fantasy. It is an unexplored Earth. Every mountain can be climbed, and below them lie endless vistas, oceans, and continents perhaps no others have seen. Who will climb the tallest mountains? Who will find the deepest sea? Set sail on vast oceans and rivers, ride wild beasts through fantastical landscapes, fly dragons over undiscovered landscapes. This description of the game leaves a lot open to the imagination and interpretation. In fact, there have been a slew of speculative as well as clickbait farm videos made about Light No Fire up to this point. So let's dive into some of the top topics based on what we know about the game from our limited frame and the kind of company Hello Games is. Is it an MMO? This is perhaps one of the most discussed or mentioned topics I see in regards to the game. Either people think it is an MMO or wonder if it will be an MMO. My answer, no. At least not in the classical sense of the term. It will likely be about as MMO as No Man's Sky is, which is a shared universe where people can meet each other from around the world. My reasoning behind this, and I will go over each point in more detail, is 1, it isn't tagged as one. In fact, it is tagged more like No Man's Sky than any other MMO sold on Steam. 2, for the size of the company, a classical MMO-styled treatment would be costly. MMOs typically aren't that profitable over time anyway. 3, too small of a team for MMO development. Now, granted, World of Warcraft started off with about 40 to 60 people, specifically working on that game though. MMOs take a lot of back-end development time and support. It is almost like developing 2 sets of software, one for the client and one for the server. 4, it would take a huge amount of servers to accommodate a literal planet-sized world zone, in air quotes, and you wouldn't really know the complexity ahead of time. I'll discuss this one. 5, the No Man's Sky model works just fine. Why reinvent the wheel? And a lot of people would debate me on that one. However, there is room for improvement. 6, this is an optional argument. Doesn't really have to apply, but storing the data for the planet-sized adventure sandbox would be prohibitively expensive for 99% of companies in existence now. The amount of data to hold, the amount of space you would need to hold a planet-sized thing would be astronomical. Very expensive. And 7, longevity and game preservation. And we'll go into each of these now. First, let's define what a classically an MMO means before proceeding. There's no definitive definition for what it means to be an MMO, other than a lot of people online, that are online in the game at once. However, we can assume that it means that those thousands or hundreds of people are able to see and interact with each other in some meaningful way. However, I will reach for one more definition here, and that is the server behind everything is authoritative. It dictates what is a legal action to all clients connected to it. Also, prevents cheating, the whole 9 yards. Thus, you cannot do anything outside of what the game wants you to do. Server architecture. Clients, you and I, with classically defined MMOs, we load up our game, it connects to a centralized server and dictates traffic to each of us based on our location within the setting. In return, it also mediates who can see who, what sorts of actions you may be able to take at the time based of your character's abilities, environment, and the effects that are on you, and so on. Oftentimes, in order to facilitate more players, there may be actually many servers in control, and they talk to each other. This helps spread the load around. Whenever hundreds of players meet up in an online game, it can be very taxing. There are limits to what even the most robust can handle in terms of connections, bandwidth, and tracking entities. There are more things that can happen in-game. The more things that happen in-game, the traffic can bottleneck many servers. Having a cluster of interconnected servers helps with this to a point. The cost of such systems is quite high and usually has dedicated teams to develop these backends and maintain them, though. Let's also look at what No Man's Sky has now. This is a dynamic peer-to-peer lobby system that only facilitates traffic for up to 32 people. It is non-authoritative, meaning that the lobby server does not control or dictate what is legal within the game. Only that it can manage network traffic between players. And it also makes sacrifices so that networking doesn't lag too much or get a lot of latency due to overwhelming amounts of events going on in the game. It does not dictate what players are seeing outside of player appearances, their ship, or what actions other players are doing. Things like mob positions, random ship flyovers, weather, time are not passed through the network and can create a weird scenario where one person can be in a storm and the other one has a bright and sunny day. Sacrifices must be made to maintain the minimum viable multiplayer actions in this case. You are typically put in an instance with up to 32 other current players at random. This selection is made again when you enter, for instance, the anomaly nexus, or if you come into an area with other players, like on expeditions. However, if you are a part of a group of players up to 4 people, your whole group is moved around from instance to instance at times. It does at least try to put players in the same instances based on galactic locations. It tries. The only other part of this is the discovery server where players upload their bases. It also holds what has been claimed and where. Anytime you enter a system or planet and make a claim, the base will reference this database. But let's go over these points now that I made. The first one, it isn't tagged as an MMO. This is important. Typically, if you are making an MMO, you want people to know it is an MMO. It creates a set of expectations for potential customers. Given the controversial problems of Hello Games has had in the past, it would be a major setback for them to be set the wrong expectations ahead of release. The game seems to be tagged more or less like No Man's Sky. It will be multiplayer, and it will have co-op features. This is in line with what we already see with No Man's Sky. When they finally put multiplayer into No Man's Sky, the peer-to-peer lobby system is used as described before. It became a multiplayer experience, but in some ways, it is sort of massively multiplayer. Through procedural generation, discovery, claim database, all players technically share the same universe. I think this is what's going to happen with Light No Fire as well. The next factor is prohibitive cost. Classical MMO structures are extremely costly. You have to pay for scalable servers, bandwidth for a projected amount of players, as well as maintenance costs for those servers, as well as your own software maintenance crew to update and keep the servers alive on your end. And you have to do this for the entire lifespan of the game. Unless Hello Games is going to charge a monthly fee or have an online shop, the mere cost of server architecture gets quite expensive very quickly. Plus, you need a team of people who can be on call at all hours of the day to make sure things are running as smooth and monitor it. While Hello Games isn't the four-person team they started out as, they are more focused on delivering fun experiences with their smaller team. Developing back-end servers is almost antithetical on how they use their resources. If you want to get an idea at costs, look at the stats for World of Warcraft or Final Fantasy Online. The costs associated with them annually would drown Hello Games in a few years. As said, Hello Games has done well for itself, but in order to maintain that, they cannot have these huge costs as an overhead. Theoretically, you could get a more hybrid model of instances, more instances of instances in a dynamic peer-to-peer, based on what they have now, more players to interact with each other. But that sort of development would be at the cost of something more fun. They would have to dedicate time and resources to such a thing. Next item, too small of a team. So I've already pointed out the cost problem. Any MMO server treatment would come at the cost of something else, better suited for giving something meaningful to the game experience itself. If we could have 100 more quests to go on over meeting some rando in the wilderness, I'd want to take up more quests. Aside from the monetary costs, there would be a toll on the creative aspects of the game just to make the back end of your typical MMO. You'd either have to hire such a team, which costs more money, and then have to integrate them into the project, which would take more time, which could have been spent elsewhere. As well as looking into their hiring history, no job postings have ever been placed for back-end support that would be associated with work on an MMO. This pretty much puts the nail in the coffin for the idea of Light No Fire being anywhere near a traditional MMO setup. While they do have a network engineer, they were hired for No Man's Sky servers. This, of course, is not the required team that would run the back end for a much larger MMO type setup. More like somebody who runs user servers for the peer-to-peer lobby and the claims database. And that's it. The next part is a little bit more complex, and that is how many servers and the complexity itself. There's a constant buzz on the concept of the server per region. I find this one of the silliest and off-the-cuff talking points when people want larger server structures. Well, okay, you want a server per region. What region? I hear people saying continents or land masses. Can't. ProcGen World doesn't have really a defined set of land masses when you go into it. You can't really know what's going to generate. You can only guess the probabilities of how things will generate. and you can probe for things, but you can't know the overall scope of things. So you don't know anything about what continents are going to show up. Well, what about longitude, latitude? An Earth-sized world is pretty big. You'd have to have a lot of servers for this. More money. More people dedicated to making sure things are running. Makes it quite difficult. What about player clusters? Okay, well, how many players? Under what conditions? Do we assign a bunch of servers to the hundreds of players who are out in the wilds alone? What happens when we reach the practical play limit in the area? Do we arbitrarily just cut people out? So you see, there's a lot of problems you have to consider when you are doing this over just the peer-to-peer system that they have now. Next point that I bring up is that the No Man's Sky model works just fine, which is the point I'm really trying to drive home here. What they have now as a developed tech works just fine in No Man's Sky. However, since it was layered on top of what was already existing, it did have to make sacrifice on what it could relay as an experience. It isn't perfect, not by a long shot, and would take some re-engineering of No Man's Sky at this point to fix that up. However, Light No Fire, while built on some of the same technology as No Man's Sky, already has an opportunity to be built from the network up, rather than the other way around, which is really how you should do it when developing a multiplayer game. It makes things easier when moving forward if you build it from the network up, rather than from the game to the multiplayer. In this, I hope that they have the ability to improve upon the model they already have in their hands. Just make it better. That's really what they need to focus on. The next section is largely optional, which is storing the state of the world. This also kind of implies that people think that the world is already in existence somehow, and that Hello Games already knows where the continents are and all this, but that's not how it's going to work. Technically, there is no data for the world other than their algorithms to generate that with a seed number, a master seed number. But you would not be able to store all that data. It would be impossible. It would be just fundamentally, astronomically expensive to store an Earth-sized amount of data. You know, Google has it with Google Earth, and they pay more money than Hello Games every year probably to run those servers. You just got to remember the Earth is really, really big. So that would be just problematic to have the world in a state. Plus, you couldn't ship it. You just could not ship that to consoles. You couldn't store it on people's computers. You can't store it really anywhere logically. It just makes no sense. That's why this project, this game, and No Man's Sky do everything procedurally, because they don't have to store the data of the world or the universe on disk or anywhere. And lastly, we come to longevity and preservation. This is kind of a hot buzz topic in the last year or so. And Hello Games has not come out one way or another saying that they support game preservation and longevity and whatnot. But it is already built into their games. If the No Man's Sky servers were to disappear, you know, their peer-to-peer lobby and their database, you could still run No Man's Sky and have the full experience without a problem. There just wouldn't be any people until somebody came along and modded in their own lobby server, which could be entirely possible. I have no idea. And I think that philosophy is going to extend to Light No Fire. I am willing to bet that it is going to be built around the idea that this game will outlast Hello Games itself. If you want to load up Light No Fire, 50 years from now, hey, look at this game. This was awesome back in the day. Back when I was a young lad. You can do that. I don't think it will have that sort of connection to online servers. And the moment you attach it to these necessary servers, the lifespan of your game is absolutely limited to the lifespan of how long they could support those servers, which is not good. I'd rather be able to play Light No Fire for as long as I can. Looks like an awesome game. And that's really my arguments against it being an MMO. I may be completely wrong here. They may turn around and surprise us and have some miracle waiting for us where, hundreds of players could be in an area at once. But I don't think it's going to happen just based on those factors that I just put forward. I think that it is going to be a great game. I think it's going to be able to share it with, friends or, even randos. You'll still be able to find people in there. But I don't think it's going to have that same architecture as an MMO, nor is it going to support servers that support hundreds or thousands of people like a traditional MMO. It would just be too expensive. They don't have or haven't shown any inkling or any hint that it is going to be an MMO other than, shared world. But, No Man's Sky is a shared universe. Everybody shares the same universe. I hope it has better multiplayer than No Man's Sky. As I said, I hope that their ground up procedure will improve upon the existing network features that No Man's Sky has. But I just don't think it's going to be MMO in the traditional sense. None of the signs are there. And if you have, a good counter argument, I'd love to hear it. But I just don't think it is. And like I said, I could be wrong. And maybe I am. Hopefully I am. I don't know. But then again, if it is more like a traditional MMO, I may not be as interested as I think. I gave up on traditional MMOs a long time ago. I'm more interested in kind of personalized experiences and stuff like that. No Man's Sky, it has its fun moments where I can be out there alone in the universe, or I can kind of hop on with a few friends and we can dot around planets and stuff and just have some fun. But that's all I got today. I think next time I'm going to cover how the procedural generation generally works in No Man's Sky and how it will work in a new scalable context when you're generating a planet-sized type of entity. So look forward to that, and hope to see you all again when I'm ready to produce another video. Alrighty, take care.